Welcome to another edition of Kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope is a live program presented to you by AFN Radio Bremerhaven each weekday morning in the interest of providing a forum of topics and ideas affecting the quality of life of Americans stationed in northern Germany. Your questions and comments are always welcome, and you're invited to call us during music breaks at Bremerhaven Military 8297. That's 8297. And now, AFN Radio's Kaleidoscope.
Good morning once again. I'm Specialist Cindy Dahl, and our guest on Kaleidoscope this morning is Mr. Manfred Muller, a resident of Bremerhaven, or who was originally from Bremerhaven. Lately, he's been a resident around the world. To give you a brief idea, well, first, would you say hello to our audience?
I'd like to say hello to you, Cindy. Hello to everybody listening to AFN Bremerhaven this morning.
Okay. Mr. Muller's story is very unique. Now, you've heard the story of Around the World in 80 Days, and now it took considerably longer time, but Mr. Muller has gone around the world in a 1963 Citroen, which is a car, I'd say, comparable to the size of a Honda Civic.
Well, knowing that the Honda Civic wasn't out, they had a smaller one out at that time. But Cindy, calling you Cindy, could you call me Manfred then?
Okay.
Okay, then maybe it'll make it a little bit easier. So, well, I left 20 years ago, and that was Easter 1964. And so it took 20 years to come back to Bremerhaven.
And what you basically did was drive around the world, right?
I left, as I mentioned, in 64 with that Citroen. A friend and I, he, Ernst Lürs from Helgoland, and we set out and drove Germany, Austria, Yugoslavia, Greece, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, India, Bhutan, Sikkim, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Hong Kong, Macau, and a few other countries. And then in 1968, reaching the United States in San Francisco.
If you think it's hard to remember that, think how hard it is to say them all in one sentence. Okay, number one question really would be, why in the world would you want to drive around the world, especially in a little car?
Yes, now in 1984 I would probably have different answers, but at that time in 1964, that car was not really that small for me or my budget. Needless to say, I wouldn't be able to drive around the world with a bus right now, but at that time it cost around $1,000. At that time, the dollar was even slightly higher, and 4,000 marks roughly, and about 160 marks between the two of us. We set out, and small is just how much you take along. And if you're two guys, and even though we had too much to start off with anyhow, so including compass and all kinds of knives and forks and plates and pans and things like that. But now one would minimize the equipment with the experience after 20 years.
Okay. Now, you said, when we were talking earlier, you said one of the reasons that you went on the trip was you had your interest in seeing the world was sparked by some American friends.
Well, I did entertain and in this area, and especially also in the radio station of AFN, and around 58, 59, I participated in various talent contests here, and somehow a gentleman called Ronnie Jenkins, he was the program director of AFN when the building was still a little bit further on there, and they were having a group called the Coachmen, and one of the guys, he was rotating, and so they asked me to fill that spot, which then later turned into a singing group called the North Winds, or North Winds later, and so he talked very often about the lands that he had visited, and so also that intrigued me to plan a venture and a trip like the one we later commenced, and also many other things influenced me, reading about people that had undertaken a trip, two French guys, a German cyclist who had traveled with a bicycle, which I had never do because that was just a little bit. I couldn't take a good suit along on a bicycle, but we did have enough room in our car to look always somehow neat and spotless.
Okay. Another question was, how in the world did you accomplish it? I mean, if anyone doesn't know what a Citroen is, it's a very small car. I drive a Toyota, and I think your Citroen is about 3 to 6 inches shorter than my Toyota is.
Well, I'd like to say hi to all the residents and the people that are from the United States that have seen the car and wonder why there is that little Citroen with a map on the back, driving around with a California license plate without stickers. And then to top it off, it's a nameplate, which of course confuses a few local authorities here, and a taped over German license plate without the fiscal sticker or the DMV sticker. And so I'd just like to say hi. And the reason having that license plate is that while I was on Helgoland, the car parked in Büsum, a little township, North Sea, and my license plate was just stolen. So I had to take the front one, and meanwhile I have my wife in Santa Monica get me a new one. From the States, that I somehow legal in my own country here with an American license plate.
With 3 license plates on your car.
Right now.
Okay. Our guest this morning, Mr. Manfred Müller, or known by everybody else as Manfred. And we're talking about his trip around the world that took nearly 20 years and was done in a 1963 Citroen. Let's start off this section with talking about, where did you go in the world?
Well, as I had indicated at the beginning of your show, Cindy, I did travel from Europe through the Near East and subcontinent India to the Far East, and stayed 3.5 years in the Far East, then also Australia, New Zealand, and the Philippines, and in Korea, Okinawa, Taiwan, Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaya, Singapore.
Now, were you, I hate to get into this, but I've got to, curiosity is killing me. Were you in Vietnam during the conflict?
I was there in 1965, 7 months, and in 1967, 2 months, and all over the place.
Now, before we go any farther, we've got to explain that you weren't just touring.
No, and I was not connected with any USO shows. The situation occurred in Hong Kong, that my friend Ernst and we played in a restaurant bar, the Bayside restaurant in Kowloon, where we met an entertainer called Joe Sade, and he had just entertained in Saigon and Pleiku and Da Nang and Vung Tau, places that are very familiar to some of the people that have been there, and he contacted an agent, and so it took about 2 months for us to clear to fly from Hong Kong to Saigon, and we did entertain first in Saigon, the Tan Son Nhut area, and later in all around the I Corps, Second Corps, Third Corps, and Fourth Corps, and had various experiences. And I have to say, it was, from the entertaining point of view, a very great learning experience, because if you have a lot of guys and you yourself 2 guys, and you have to entertain them and come across, I think that was quite a job, and we managed very well.
Now, I have another question to ask you, but first I want to say, you mentioned earlier that you had about 160 marks between you when you left on this venture. And so basically what you did was you paid your way to the next town by performing, right?
Yes, and at the very beginning now, we of course set out to make miles or make kilometers, and that you could see on the map that we'd already done quite some traveling, and our money reached, with a full gas tank or petrol tank, to Austria, and in Yugoslavia we had a few items that we could sell, like a transistor radio. At the time, they were slightly bigger. And we had items that, personal belongings that we sold, and which took us to Greece, Turkey, and so on. And then we did already sing, and the singing did not necessarily make cash for us, but it paid our stay, our food, and also at various times, for the gasoline. Okay. And made contacts with introductions to people that we should look up and where we could entertain. Actually, in Pakistan, that's where we started singing for, pay. And also there it was that the embassy personnel, and especially the American embassy in Karachi, there was a consulate because the embassy was in Rawalpindi, and we stayed with the people of the consulate there and did entertain there and also got paid for it. And they introduced us to Radio Pakistan Karachi, and a personal friend of ours who then put us up there and gave us introductions to other embassies and so on. So from there on, actually, the financial part started.
Okay. Now, you played in to different people, different groups of people throughout the world. And we have to tell you, he brought his guitar. We're going to let you hear some of the things. Like, you said you were in Vietnam. Your audience in Vietnam would have been totally different from your audience in Canada, which would have been totally different from your audience in Hong Kong.
That's right.
Okay, so why don't you give us an example of what type of music went with what group of people?
Drop the pic because I drank your strong coffee, Cindy.
I made the coffee this morning.
Did you like that, Jim? Of course, Vietnam was mostly, I wanna go home. I wanna go home. Oh, how I want to go home. Last night I went to sleep in Detroit City, and I dreamed about the cotton picking fields back home. Well, I dreamed about my mama, dear papa, sister and brother, and I dreamed about the girl that keep waiting for me all so long. I wanna go home. Can't you hear me now? I wanna go home. Oh, how I want to go home. Body, buddy, run down.
I take it that went over very well in Vietnam.
Oh, yeah. Short timer song.
Okay. Now, what other kind of music did you play that pertained to the audience?
Many of the people, knowing that we are from Germany, and they, also and often and most frequently asked us to sing some German songs, and the most famous was always In München steht ein Hofbräuhaus, ein Zweigsofa, da läuft so manches Fässchen auf, ein Zweigsofa. You know that song. I like to tell the listening audience that we are having some talking microphones here, and that we are not really equipped for any morning special musical shows. So
we definitely
I hope
gave them something to sip
sound.
their coffee with, though. Okay, our guest, Mr. Manfred Muller, we'll call him Manfred. He is a resident of Bremerhaven, but he spent the past 20 years being a resident of the world. Let's get one more taste of music, of what you played for your listeners around the world.
Well, of course, in south of the border in Mexico, of course, I learned to sing some Spanish songs, and very well known to all of you folks when Nat King Cole sang Solamente una vez amé en la vida, solamente una vez y nada más. Gesundheit, Cindy. Una vez nada más en mi huerto brilló la esperanza que alumna camino de mi soledad. Muñequita linda, con cabeza de oro, con dientes de perla, labios de rubí. Dime si me quieres como yo te adoro, si de mí te acuerdas como yo de ti. Da, 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 da.
Okay, now we've heard what you did, we heard why you did it, how you did it. We've talked about where you went and what you did when you got there.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked a little bit about who you saw and the kind of music you played for them. But one question that I know everybody's asking is, if it was the same car the entire 20 years, how did you manage that, to keep the same car in peace?
Well, some people have a few facelifts here and there when they get into due age, and so did Difty, the Citroen. But if you look at it from the outside and compare it to the pictures that I showed you, like here in 1965, the appearance and the outlook and definitely the spirit, and that's something which has maintained, and it's still the same. So I had a couple of changes getting to the chassis or the motor, but other than that, it's the same. It's mainly I believe it's a spirit that I set out with that car and I came back with that car. That was
basically
what I wanted
car.
to do, and now that cycle has been done.
Are you going to sell the car?
There is no price. Didn't you say the lady would never sell her sewing machine or something like that? And no, there is no price.
Okay, in case you're wondering, Manfred brought a book of memoirs with him that has pictures of his car being stuck in mud holes and in floods and going through the jungles and
singing.
Yes, okay. He's got an entire book here, but you traveled in the United States and Canada. Citroens are not exactly a widespread type of vehicle in the United States. How in the world do you find parts for a car?
Nobody will ever understand, unless you have a car like that there are parts and there are cars in all kinds of countries. Let's talk about the United States. And I wanted to let you know that I did travel extensively, with that car from San Francisco, California, and then later stayed in Los Angeles area, and then drove all the way to Cape Cod and upper U.S. back to the West Coast. And I've been from south of, the Texas region or Florida up to Maine and up to Oregon. I've seen many parts of that country, and I like to just bring across that I've been treated beautifully in your country, and I also extend these wishes to all you folks that are right now in my country, that everybody treats you only half as well as they have treated me there. So parts, you were talking about parts. You have to really be on the lookout. But, there's one thing that I like there is that people have a love for older things. That means you have catalogs, you have people that have clubs. And you look around here right now, I can hardly see a car that's older than 1978, and then already people say that's an old car. Yet there you find old nostalgia cars. And this car also, once in California, there are clubs, Citroen clubs, and you wouldn't believe how very well interwoven they are, that you can get parts somehow, but they are slightly more expensive than that, and it is not always easy, and especially when you have friends that go back to Europe or to Germany, and you ask them to get a simple lens for a taillight. There's no way they won't be able to find them because they are not in the books, and that you have beautiful wrecking yards and things like that, and you can just go crazy on them, and so it's a trivial problem, but that somehow brings it closer to the spirit of the car, because you have to be involved in the machinery and so on.
Now, when you, say, blew a tire in the middle of a flood in the rainy season in Thailand,
You make it really scary, Cindy.
Okay,
Blow
anyway,
a tire.
You're not in the United States. You're not in Europe, where you could possibly get parts for these cars. You're in the Orient or the Mideast.
Yes.
What did you do when you found out that you had a flat tire and the tire that was your spare was already gone?
Good, Cindy, I like it, because ladies never like to change tires. And so anyhow, I had 2 spare tires, and luckily that size is a 15-inch rim, and it would also fit a Volkswagen tire. And the Volkswagen tires are available, even though the Citroen ones are narrower, but the same 15-inch rim.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, our time is already coming to a close, and we only had one music break. Our guest today, Mr. Manfred Mueller from Bremerhaven, who lives in Bremerhaven now and has spent the past 20 years
looking for a job. Looking for a job. Yeah, I'd like to go to the NCO club and to maybe check out, because we had a call that I might do some entertaining at the local NCO club here in Bremerhaven.
Okay. Is that legal? Okay. Anyway, I'm Specialist Cindy Dahl, our guest on Kaleidoscope, Mr. Manfred Mueller. He's the man with the Citroen that has the map of the world on it. And you take care until tomorrow, when we'll have another Kaleidoscope.
Welcome to another edition of Kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope is a live program presented to you by AFN Radio Bremerhaven each weekday morning in the interest of providing a forum of topics and ideas affecting the quality of life of Americans stationed in northern Germany.